And with all that said, I'm going to hand the stage over to Chris and Frake.
Awesome. Thanks very much, Craig. So, good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Um, just to give you a little bit of an overview of myself, I know Craig's just done it, but I'm not as good looking as Frake. That's why I'm having to be in black and white in these photographs. But yeah, my name's Chris Marks. Outbound product management basically means both Frake and I engage with customers, partners, and we have direct input into product roadmaps. So, uh, conversations we have with our customers help develop our future product, and that's really the roles we both do. I've been in the industry for a very long time. That means I'm very old. Um, but I've seen the industry grow from its kind of humble beginnings back in the 90s. Frank, do you want to say a quick hello?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Freek Berson, and as Chris, also a principal outbound PM at Parallels. Not as old as Chris, but in the space for quite some time as well in the end user computing space. So that's what I enjoy doing. Besides a whole other stuff around automation and Azure automation is what I enjoy doing as well. And yeah, we're excited to be able to talk to you today on well what we're working on and what we're working towards the new year as well. And yeah, I suggest we get started. So you want to take us through the agenda, Chris?
Yeah, let's go. So we're going to take a little bit of a step out of Parallels as an organization and just have a little look about what's going on. Why is this hybrid multi-cloud thing happening? How important is it to people? But then we're also going to have a look at some of the challenges that organizations are having trying to cope with this new world, this ever-changing world that we're living in. We're then going to go through some very specific examples of how Parallels RAS can overcome some of those challenges and can help your business move through that landscape. If you've got any questions, we're going to split that into a number of sections. We're going to try and answer questions relevant to each section as we go, so feel free to ask them. We've also got a Q&A section at the end to catch anything we don't get. And if we still don't get to answer your question, we will follow up after the webinar via email if you provide that to us. So let's take a little step back. So many of you on the call will almost certainly have seen the article on the left-hand side of this slide. Okay, it appears on LinkedIn all of the time. There's bound to be an updated one coming soon, and that is that public cloud spending is growing very quickly. It's growing. It's predicted to have grown by about 20% in 2022, and that isn't going to slow down anytime soon. If anything, that's going to accelerate. So the perception is that organizations are shifting. They're shifting into public cloud, which is then replacing services that are on-prem. The challenge is that that's not what the numbers are actually saying. So what is actually happening, and if you look at the information on the right-hand side of the screen, this is where it's really kind of telling. Yes, organizations are spending more money on public cloud, that's undeniable. The thing is, they're also spending more money on on-premises infrastructure. So it's not like your public cloud spending is going up by 20% and your on-premises spending is coming down by the same number. So it's not like a seesaw one side is being replaced by the other. Total IT spending is increasing, which obviously presents a slight challenge with the economic downturn that most of the globe is facing right now. But it's really important to kind of think about this, because this is where this hybrid cloud stuff starts really making sense, right? About why companies are kind of doing this stuff. I'm still developing the new exciting public cloud native way of working in one breath, but I'm still not able to shut stuff down generally. That's the general feel. Obviously, there are exceptions to that as well. To give you some more examples, Microsoft did a survey, and if you think about it, Microsoft are probably the least likely organization to tell us that hybrid or multi-cloud is going to be a thing, because they're one specific public cloud vendor, and that's going through massive growth right now. But their survey they did in 2022, all these URLs are available to you, by the way, but their survey they did in 2022 is basically saying 95% of organizations see hybrid cloud as critical. And they also say they're going to have to keep some stuff on premises as well as anything they might be doing in the public cloud. And this is really the backdrop of the conversation we've got, and really the area where Parallels is focused. So some of the challenges companies have got with dealing with this, I've got some stuff on premises. I might have some stuff in a hosting center. I might have some new applications or some new software as a service solutions I'm consuming as an organization. It means I need to try and maintain my ability to be agile. Okay, I can give you a whole massive number of organizations who are no longer with us purely because of this agility piece. And this really means what we want to try and do as much as possible is avoid lock-in. As soon as we're locked into one particular solution, that means our ability to be agile is reduced. So we need to try and look at ways where we can deal with what might come our way in 2-3 years' time, what might actually be happening around the corner. Organizations that might not even exist yet could actually take a really strong foothold in the next couple of 3 years. It's how IT works. It's why our industry changes so fast. At the same time, maintaining security, as all of you will know on the call, is paramount. So we've got to make sure that the people connecting to our environment, particularly now we're in a position where our data is not just in one place. Our data could be across multiple public cloud providers. Obviously, we're saying from a hybrid point of view, I might still have a decent amount on-prem, but I need to be able to deal with that access to that security in a consistent way. If it suddenly becomes complex to maintain security, it means you're almost certainly going to end up with security holes. So what we want to do is we want to make the application of security nice and simple, so it's consistent and you can be sure that it's under control. Controlling cost, this becomes much more challenging when we have multiple ways of delivering the same thing. So I've gone from a scenario where 5-6 years ago, I was paying for a lump of stuff and then I was renewing it every year, to almost everything being a subscription now. So that being a subscription, I pay for an amount over an amount of time. I want to do as much as I can to reduce the unit cost of that subscription. So what can I do to help manage and optimize the investment I'm making, particularly in public cloud, which is often charged by the minute or by the gigabyte or whatever unit of cost that public cloud provider wants to charge. And we'll have a little look at that as well. So the first topic is driving agility, and I'm going to hand that over to Freek to take you through that.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. So the first topic is driving agility. So we have a couple of scenarios, a couple of use cases, and a couple of areas we want to address where we are driving agility to help you with that multi-cloud approach and with that freedom of choice when it comes to different environments. So first of all, driving agility when it comes to our own release cadence in terms of the Parallels RAS product. So as you might know, or if not, here's a good overview. We have released our 19.0 release as of July this year. So that was a major release for us, containing a whole lot of new features, new integrations, and new options, new technologies. And this is, of course, just a short list of the most important ones we wanted to quickly address throughout this webinar as well. So first of all, in the management bucket, we now have support for MSAX app attach integration. So if you're not familiar, this is a application containerization technology that we now fully have integrated into our product, making it easier to deal with application lifecycle management, which is still one of the biggest, pain points, if you will, for any AUC environment. We also have Let's Encrypt certificate management integrated, and Chris is going to talk about that in the next part of this webinar as well. So it provides a much easier way to deal with SSL certificates. And also in that area, URL redirection, which allows us to offload redirects and redirect URLs back to the local client, as well as controlling any users' logon hours. When it comes to flexibility, we're constantly providing more flexibility and more options to choose from, and more freedom of choice, if you will. So we've added support for Amazon as a cloud provider, which means we're now able to also deploy resources directly to Azure with a direct REST API integration. We'll talk about that as well. Multiple MFA providers, definitely something on the security side. So we'll be talking about that later, which allows you to have multiple MFA providers within the same environment to work with. And of course, we're always working towards expanding our reach when it comes to not only providers, but also clients. So we've added an ARM64 client to our client base, as well as new options to perform power management throughout all of our providers. And lastly, a couple of things around expression-based filtering. So we have new expression-based filterings in place, which allow you to have much more of a conditional access approach when it comes to publishing applications and providing access to those. So again, of course, also in the on the security side. And on the end user side, we have enabled or introduced email-based account discovery. So what that means is that the user is able to log on to any of the Parallels clients with their corporate email address, and the entire client is then configured for them based on the public domain. So that was all in July 2020. But then there was a second release, which was this month actually, because it's the last day of November, 19.1, which builds upon all of the features that we introduced in 19.0. So again, more capabilities and more enrichment on the management side. So we've extended our MSAX app attach integration to also support VDI scenarios, so not only RDSH. We've introduced RAS policy search, which allows you to very easily search through all of the policies you have defined, which was a very common ask we've got. And also introduced new pre-configured reports around user experience. So making sure that we get more telemetry insights and data on the perceived end user experience. And as well, and this is definitely a continuous effort to expand our API reach to make sure that we allow automation for all of the options and all of the components within our product. When it comes to flexibility, again, we are expanding the reach. So we now also have, in terms of providers, support for the latest Nutanix AOS version, as well as a Parallels client for Linux for Ubuntu. And lastly, and that is of course also ongoing, continuous improvement when it comes to performance, when it comes to security. We'll address some topics in this talk as well some very specific VDI troubleshooting improvements. So a large list, but definitely no time, to cover all of these in great detail. So we will be picking out a couple of these throughout this session. If you're interested in the entire list, we can advise you to take a look at our What's New page on the Parallels website, which is also continuously updated with our latest features and our latest improvements. So switching topics a little bit, but also driving agility from within our own product. So I already mentioned freedom of choice. This is definitely something that we continuously are after to improve that. And that means that you're able to use any provider that you want, right? So we have direct integration with VMware, with Hyper-V, with Scale Computing, with Nutanix, to allow you to directly publish and provide resources through those providers, as well as remote PC scenarios, which allows you to bring in physical or virtual PCs directly into the product, which is very popular during the pandemic, of course. But also direct integration with all kinds of various public clouds. So Microsoft Azure, as well as Amazon EC2, and also Azure Virtual Desktop, which is now also fully integrated into our product. So regardless of the provider that you select, we are also able to provide a wizard-driven approach when it comes to installing and configuring and managing and maintaining all of these providers. So these are just two brief examples on Azure Virtual Desktop Provider and Amazon EC2. which allow us to take the administrator through all of the steps from A to Z when it comes to installing that provider and start using it. So what we're really after is making it easy for the admin, providing choice when it comes to providers, and also allowing you to install Parallels RAS in hours rather than in days. So let's take a look at an example then. So let's take a look at Azure Virtual Desktop as an integration example. So if you're not less familiar what that is, AVD is a application and desktop delivery technology hosted by Microsoft in Azure. And what we're doing with Parallels, we are integrating with that service, meaning we can directly deploy resources to Azure Virtual Desktop, but we're also extending on top of it. So we're making it easier, of course, to deploy. We'll show a couple of examples on that, but we're also improving the end user experience. So we're building on top of what AVD natively provides. And we're doing a lot of stuff around cost optimization, and that'll be our last topic in this webinar as well. So first of all, let's take a look at that architecture of that integration. So this is high level what it looks like. So in the middle, we have the two white boxes with our Parallels RAS infrastructure components, right? So if you're familiar with these are our secure gateways, connection brokers, management consoles, etc. They now offer a direct integration with Azure Virtual Desktop Control Plane. So using REST API, we are able to create resources that are needed for any AVD environments, such as workspaces and host pools and application groups. But we also go beyond that by providing a direct integration to create template images and to provide profile management. We'll touch on that in just a second as well. So without having any knowledge about Azure and about subscriptions and about deploying resources and auto scaling, etc., we're all handling that right from within the Parallels console. And as you can see on the bottom right here, we'll also, of course, still have that integration with other options. So this is where the hybrid options come in to have not only Azure Virtual Desktop, so there's no cloud lock-in or vendor lock-in, but we're also providing from within the same environment, from within the same console, essentially, access to Amazon and to on-prem hosted VMware or Hyper-V or all of the other providers that we mentioned before. So using the same environment, that is why we're providing the freedom of choice and the flexibility to choose any public cloud that we support or any on-prem or hosted provider. And of course, we're using the same Parallels client to allow the end user to access all of those resources. So that can be a mix between AVD and on-prem and hybrid and Amazon, using the same Parallels client and optionally also leveraging the AVD client if that makes more sense for the use case. So let's take a look at that in action. So what we have prepared is a short overview on what the AVD integration in Parallels console actually looks like. So in this scenario, we're looking at Parallels RAS interacting with Azure Virtual Desktop and how to set up from scratch using the console. So let's take a look. So this is our console. As you can see, we have a wizard that guides you through the Azure Virtual Desktop deployment. And the first thing we need to provide here is, of course, information in regards to that secure REST API connection. So things like the tenant ID, the subscription ID, the application ID, those all need to be in place in order to make that secure connection. So once we click next, and this is the wizard actually taking the admin through, is the wizard now comes back with the creation of a Azure Virtual Desktop workspace, which is one of the mandatory objects we need in the Azure cloud. So, and this is really helping the administrator from A to Z to deploy Azure Virtual Desktop from scratch. So this is providing more details about the naming convention, about resource groups on where we're going to deploy this, as well as locations. And once we click next, the wizard actually automatically continues by the next step, which is providing more information about the host pool. So this is the name of the host pool, the description, the resource group, and the location, which allows us to integrate with Azure Virtual Desktop, providing, of course, more information on the host pool configuration if we needed to, and take it to the next step. And again, we're taking the administrator to the next step. We're now selecting template image options. So we're not only able to use any existing host as a template image, but also points to the Azure Gallery, which already provides a huge list of different template images that are available from Windows 11 to Windows 10, single multi-user, as well as Windows Server. So those are coming all from the Azure Cloud, of course. So in this case, we're going to select Windows 11 Enterprise Multi-Session as the operating system template. And once we select that location and click Next, we're going to provide some more information about auto-scaling. We'll address that in just a second as well. And more information on where to store this in terms of virtual networks and subnets, etc. And then as the next step, let me just quickly pause the video here. Again, we have image optimization. So why is that important? That allows us to optimize the template image in terms of stopping services that we don't need, or removing stuff that we don't need in order to have a higher user density, because higher user density means more users on a single machine, means less machines, and eventually means less cost. So that's all integrated, and we have over 140 different image optimizations options in there. So we guide the admin into selecting one of those image optimizations, as well as some sysprep information in order to prep the image for duplication. And once that's completed, we're also guiding the administrator into selecting then the users and the groups that are going to have access to this environment. So there's Active Directory integration here, of course, which allows us to select, in this case, a test group of users who is going to have access to this AVD environment. And as a last step, and this is interesting to quickly stop on as well, is our integration. Oh, sorry. That was me. Is our integration in Avis Logix, right? So Avis Logix, if you're not familiar, it's a profile container technology provided by Microsoft, and we have direct integration with the configuration of that as well. So without installing the AVD agent, without downloading any ADMX templates to do management and configuration, we're all going to configure that right from within the same console. So just as you see on the screen, by providing the UNC path towards that location, in this case on Azure Files, we're able to store those profile containers without having to worry about the installation and the configuration of this profile management. And that was the last step. So once this is completed, and we won't be watching the entire video during this session, but it is available online as well. The deployment will actually finish and start to create host pools and application groups and workspaces and do the template image management and the Avis Logix configuration all for us. So without even touching the Azure portal, we can now start to leverage the Azure Cloud as one of the providers right from within Parallels RAS. So you might be wondering, what then about EC2? Does that all also apply to Amazon? And the answer is yes, because if we take a look at how that integration works, hopefully this looks familiar, right? So we just replaced Azure Virtual Desktop with AWS in this case, and it's exactly the same thing. So using the same RAS infrastructure components, we are now using REST API connecting to Amazon EC2 in order to create resources in that environment. So those are more in terms of templates and groups of applications and groups of desktops, but for the rest, it's exactly the same. So, and this is of course where that freedom of choice and that flexibility on choosing different clouds or multiple clouds maybe comes into play. So the last topic around driving agility that I want to touch on before I'll hand it back to Chris is MSIX AppAttach. And if you're not familiar with this is actually, the name implies two different technologies. One is MSIX, which is a new application packaging format for application vendors to deliver their application in a more modern way. And the AppAttach technology is then taking a MSIX application, converting it into a virtual disk, and then attaching it underneath the operating system of any end-user computing environment. So the reason you might want to do that and what it results into is a decrease of a number of template images that you need, because applications are now extracted from the operating system. And also a decrease in the number of times you have to deploy and redeploy and update your template image and the entire environment, because we can now install applications or provide access to applications without installing them into the operating system. So mosaic Appetite was introduced firstly by Microsoft as part of the Azure Virtual Desktop service. So it is AVD only. But within Parallels RAS, we have taken that technology and integrating it with it, and also bringing it to RDSH and VDI environments as well. So this allows you to have the same mosaic Appetite technology provided into other environments, whether that's hosted or on-prem or in any other public cloud, to have that available. So besides the integration, we are also expanding on mosaic Appetite by providing version control, as you can see on the screenshot on the bottom right here, which allow you to tag applications as production or pre-production or something else, which helps you improving the overall application lifecycle management. And the last thing that we do in there is we also deal with the certificate management around mosaic. So if you're familiar with mosaic applications, you might know that they always have to be signed by a code signing certificate, which also means that all of your hosts need to be able to trust that certificate chain. We are dealing with that without having to worry about trusting these certificates or running scripts or doing any policies, etc. We are making sure that all the hosts always trust that certificate in order to work with mosaic Appetite applications. So a couple of things around driving agility. Hopefully those were interesting. So Chris, back to you in regards to maintaining security, unless, I don't know, correctly, we have any questions we want to address now?
Yeah, there have been a handful of questions that have come through, so thanks everyone. If you have questions, continue to pop them into the Q&A panel. Chris, I'll let you kick off the first question, and then I'll get to a couple as well.
Yeah, thanks, Craig. So we had a question about the Parallels VDI. Is it on top of the Microsoft AVD solution? Does the Microsoft AVD solution kind of come with the Parallel stuff? They are completely separate. However, the vast majority of customers will have licensing for AVD as part of their Microsoft licensing. The Parallels client operates using that AVD control plane, and that is unlike most other vendors in this space. Most vendors don't actually use the AVD control plane. They kind of bundle straight over the top. We're directly integrating into AVD itself. So you're very likely to have the AVD subscription as well. The Parallel subscription cost will layer over the top of that, and it will allow you to deploy not just AVD, but as Frank's just shown you, EC2 and on-prem as well. Hope that answers the question.
Great, thanks, Chris. So Frank, we have one from Gerard here talking about MFA providers. So in regards to MFA providers, can those also be used as input for policies to create context-aware access to published resources?
Yeah, that is a great question, and I think that Chris is going to talk about more about MFA. So we'll probably have to just we wait for answering that question, because I think Chris is going to talk about that MFA provider integration some more, right, Chris?
Yeah, I can cover that when I do the MFA piece just now.
Okay, great. There's another question here about FSLogix. So should I ask that now or wait?
Yeah, let's do it now.
So FSLogix configuration for AVD, does that integration also apply outside of AVD when using RDS or VDI, for example?
Yeah, that is a great question. So we've seen in the video the integration with FSLogix specifically for FSLogix for Azure Virtual Desktop. But yeah, the answer is yes. We are able to do that same configuration towards other environments as well. So we take care of the installation of FSLogix agents as well as the entire configuration, and that goes beyond AVD. So that also applies to RDSH, to VDI, and any on-prem hosted scenario. Yeah, that's right.
Great. Okay, so that's it from my side. Chris, did you have any more questions there?
Yeah, I was trying to type because Frank and I have got joint control of the mouse. I'm trying not to use my laptop, so I was trying to type my response to you, Ugo. But I will type it. But I'll kind of put it over the mic as well. So Ugo's asked what's needed inside AWS to make the integration work. Do I need a client at the AWS side? That kind of stuff. All we need is a template VM, either a multi-session or a single session template VM. What the wizard will do to that template VM is it will install a Parallels agent on that template VM, and that's all that is needed at the AWS side. When that VM is cloned, the agent gets cloned with it, and it allows us to control that VM accordingly. So the control plane doesn't need to be in AWS. It can be wherever you want. You can put it in AWS if you like. You can have it on-prem. You can have it in Azure. It doesn't really matter. From a guest virtual machine point of view, we just need an agent. Everything else can be deployed natively with AWS. Hopefully that answered your question, Ugo. I will try and write that down during Frake's next piece, but I'm doing it with a mobile phone. So apologies for my slowness and my thumbs and my typing. Any other questions, please feel free to throw them in the Q&A. We'll try and answer them as quickly as we can, thumbs permitting. So security, we all know security is a really big deal. Okay, so how does Parallels, specifically Parallels RAS, help us help you? So firstly, we've actually got SSL certificate management, including the SSL certificates themselves, available directly inside the console at no additional cost to you as a customer. So what we've seen in the industry an awful lot of times is this scenario, and it really does help. You'll have an administrator signing up for an SSL certificate that might renew in 12 months. They unwittingly, because they don't realize what's about to happen, give their own email address for that. That administrator within that 12 months then departs. They will get a reminder to renew that SSL certificate, but then no longer there. No one gets the reminder. The first the organization knows that that SSL certificate has expired is every single client connection that should be connecting to that secure resource can no longer connect. And that's led to numerous instances that I've seen with my own eyes, because as Craig's told you, I have worked in technical support before. It's a massive impact. It's a really simple thing, but it causes a massive impact. So what we allow you to do is, via our partners at Let's Encrypt, we've got SSL certificates auto-renewing, and by default they'll auto-renew every 30 days. And it just goes in a cycle. You can edit the administrator email to which expiry SSL or renewal SSL messages are sent inside the console. It's all completely integrated. Okay, so really nice, neat solution. You don't have to use those Let's Encrypt certificates. You can use any third-party SSL solution you'd like as well, and you can add those certificates in there too. But it's just a really nice, neat solution for those organizations wanting to keep it nice and simple. We can use multiple MFA providers. I'm pretty confident pretty much everyone on the call knows what this kind of security method is. So it's always going to use my primary authentication method first. So it's going to authenticate me, for example, with Active Directory initially, but this also gives me multiple factors of authentication. Okay, so it'll be a one-time only password, it will be radius authentication, or will be some other solution. And the really cool thing is we can integrate with multiple providers. So this really helps you if you're a service provider dealing with multiple customers and they might have their own method of MFA. It also allows you to have some users using MFA, some users not. Let's say it's an internal user versus a contractor, all those kind of things. So it really does help you manage all of that stuff. And that's natively in the product, no matter what customer you are. If you have Parallels RAS, you have the ability to do this. You don't need an additional license. Oh, there was the question, wasn't there? Was it about using policies? What was it? Can you remind me of the question, Craig? If you're still there. Or Frank,
I can do it. So I'm looking at the question. So yeah, it was in regards to these MFA providers. Someone asked if it's possible to use them as input for policies to create context-aware published resources.
Yes, you can. So there's a couple of ways of using MFA providers in order to control who has access to what. So you could basically say, if you're in this group, you must use MFA. You must use this MFA provider. And if you're in this group, i.e. security group, so Active Directory group, you must be, you can use this, or if you're in this group, you don't need to use MFA. Or you can attach that MFA provider to what's called a theme. And that theme determines if I want to access these resources that are provided by this theme, then I need to use this particular MFA. If I'm accessing resources in a different theme, which might be a different group of applications being delivered with that theme, then I can do that. So absolutely, you can use the application. Let's say I've got a list of 10 applications, 5 applications I can restrict, and they need to be able to be using MFA. Hopefully that's answered that question. Feel free to write to us that I haven't.
And thanks. It would also help if I came off mute next time. So
Thanks, Craig.
yeah.
And there's a whole bunch of other security things as well, but we've got lots to talk you through. So this is the last thing I'll mention. Every single security setting that gets changed is audited. So what you're able to do is see who changed what and when. Some of those changes, let's say I have disabled a policy, or let's say I've added something into some existing screen. That will get noted. And it will also, if you look closely on the little dialog box that's shown there on the right-hand side, there's a revert button. So let's say a policy change, maybe an administrator's made a change and they didn't really think it through and it's gone live and now you've got an issue. You literally press that revert button and it will reverse the change that was made without you having to go and dig out the administration screen. Obviously, that revert will also be audited. So everything kind of just lists itself in there. Okay. So there's loads of security stuff we could go through, but we're trying to focus on these 3 key areas. If you need any more information on that, please reach out to us and we can have a specific session just for you guys. So if there's any questions on security, happy to answer them. If not, I shall hand it back to Frank.
So, Chris, there was a question from Dan here. It says, great about Let's Encrypt integration. What Parallels RAS roles require SSL? So, can Let's Encrypt be used for all of those? And secondly, is manual renew revoke also possible if needed?
Okay, so the roles that are defaulting to needing SSL certificates are for definite the secure gateway. So when you install a secure gateway, it comes out of the box with a self-signed certificate that you'd need to replace in production anyhow. So Let's Encrypt is ideal for that. We've also got a thing called a high availability load balancer that deals with that as well. So those 2 roles are the ones that interface with the humans. So that's the primary security connection that we're dealing with here from an SSL point of view. So those certificates and those roles are what are going to get secured with those certificates. And the other thing was manual revoke. Yeah, for sure. So it all automatically renews, but you can revoke that certificate anytime if you've got a security challenge. You can remove that SSL certificate anytime. You can obviously swap SSL providers if that's what you wanted to do. You can do all of that in the administration console. Also, the SSL certificates you get applied to a single site. By default, all of those SSL settings are replicated to multiple sites. So multiple physical data centers or cloud providers or whatever you've got can get exactly the same SSL settings. Hopefully that has dealt with that. Any more, Craig, before I hand over to Frank?
Great. There's one more here, but I think let's type up a reply there and continue on to Frake's section.
Awesome. Over to you, Frank.
Great. Yeah, thanks, Chris. Yeah, so for this last topic, we're talking how to control costs, which is, of course, besides security and besides driving agility and providing freedom of choice, definitely really important. And becomes even more important when we're transitioning towards any public cloud, because as soon as you start to hit any public cloud, like Azure, like Amazon, you will be charged by the consumption that you drive in there. So in terms of virtual machines, the more virtual machines you deploy, the more cost you will have at the end. So controlling costs and getting insights into cost is becoming very important in that space. So what we're doing with Parallels RAS, we're helping you to control public cloud costs more specifically in these 3 different areas. So first of all, it's a hassle-free hybrid cloud deployment. And I love that terminology, but what does it really mean? So it means that we're not only providing you access to one of the public clouds, but we're providing you with access to on-prem and to hybrid and to other scenarios as well. So we're combining all of these technologies, which again, as Chris mentioned in the introduction, is still very important when it comes to hybrid scenarios. A lot of organizations are asking for that. I would do that from the same console as well as from the same license. So there's no additional license fees needed. If you, for example, would compare that towards an Azure Virtual Desktop native environment, Azure Virtual Desktop is, of course, bound to Azure, right? But there are options to do Azure Virtual Desktop on-prem as well, but they require additional license fees. They require a very specific hardware and a lot of complexity and a lot of limitations as well. So we remove all of those limitations and really provide that hassle-free hybrid option beyond a single cloud. And the second one is about rapid deployment and ease of management. And hopefully you've got an idea on what that looks like based on the video demo that we showed you, where a lot of the actions are wizard driven, and we're helping administrators to easily deploy with all kinds of integrations. And by doing that, we're actually reducing the time that you spend on maintenance, on troubleshooting, and on installation as well. So this is, of course, based on the wizard-driven approach, but not only that, also the integration with MS Logix, the integration with MSAX AppAttach, the integration with Let's Encrypt that Chris also mentioned before. So adding up all of those automated tasks results into that reduction that you spend on management and maintenance. And the last one, and that is, of course, by far the biggest cost factor, is the actual cost, cloud cost consumption, right? So in case of Azure Virtual Desktop, the majority of cloud consumption cost comes from Azure Compute, right? Because we're deploying virtual machines in Azure, and all of those virtual machines, if you leave them running 24/7, will generate a lot of cost at the end of the month. So that's a big part. And also on top of that, things like the storage consumption that you need for virtual machines, for profiles, etc. What we're doing with that integration with Parallels RAS and AVD, we are drastically decreasing the cost that you are going to get at the end of the month. And the reason why is that we're doing a lot of smart things when it comes to auto scaling, when it comes to that image management and image optimization that we talked about as well, which result in these storage cost reduction percentages. So let's actually take a look at an example use case then. So let's take AVD as the example here and take a look at a sample or organization of 500 users in total, right? So they have employees that we can describe as knowledge workers, right? So they make heavy use of Office applications like Outlook and PowerPoint and Edge, etc. And they require a peak concurrency of 80%, which means that 80% of that 500 will be logged on at the same time during office hours, during peak hours. And they also require 5% concurrency outside of office hours. So these are weekends and evenings, etc. 5% of that 500. If you would take a look at an AVD environment, that means you should be able to handle 400 concurrent sessions, right? That's that 80% of the total. If you would then calculate that back to calculate into a number of session host servers, a number of host servers that the user logs onto, you would reach about 20 session host servers based on a DS8 V5 VM. So that's 8 CPUs and I believe 32 gigs of memory. If you would leave those VMs running 24/7, that will reach well over $5,000 per month, only on Azure consumption for the AVD session hosts. So this is not even including any backend that you need or any other options that you need in Azure. So that's a lot, right? So What we do with Parallels RAS, we're drastically decreasing the cost in Azure consumption, as you can see on the right-hand side. So by far, the biggest portion of those costs are coming from the Azure compute cost, right? And so why is that so much decreased with Parallels RAS? We're doing a lot of intelligent stuff when it comes to stopping and deallocating virtual machines if they are not needed, right? So once you stop and deallocate a virtual machine, you will remove the compute cost that is calculated for that virtual machine. But on top of that, what we also do is actually remove virtual machines and also recreate them on the fly as part of our intelligent auto scaling. So that means that we're also saving an additional amount of compute cost, but also an additional amount of storage cost because the VM will actually be temporarily removed and recreated on the fly as well. And the last one is in regards to support, because all of the support is included in our product. We're also saving you from 24/7 support on top of these environments. So this is just one example environment of 500 users, and we did the same calculations for 250, for 750, for 1,000 and above as well. So if you're interested in those numbers, feel free to reach out to us afterwards to talk about those scenarios some more. But just want to show you this as an example use case. So more specifically on that support cost, as I mentioned, that is all included in our product, which is also quite unique, I think, in the market. So 24/7 support, which includes phone and email and remote support, it is all part of the subscription. So regardless of the number of tickets or incidents that you raise, that is all included to make the best support experience possible. That also includes free training for administrators to become a technical professional or technical advanced professional as well. So there's free instructor-led training for everyone to join, as well as the same thing for any sales certification. And lastly, in terms of costs, and this is of course always an interesting topic, is licensing, right? So we have our philosophy is to make licensing easy and simple, right? So there's only one license for the entire product, which is the same concurrent user license, right? So it's not total number of users, it's only concurrent, and it includes all of the features that we discussed before, and also all of the improvements that we'll do along the way. And we are also really a believer of providing free access to trials, right? So our 30-day trial is completely free, but also contains all of the features. So it is not limited in any way, because we believe that we believe in providing free access to such a trial for, trying out that environment without being limited to the number of features that are in such a trial. So when it comes to those subscriptions, those are 1 year or 3 year subscriptions. And again, that is for the same concurrent license. So including the support, including the training, and including all of the features, and also regardless of which provider you are talking to, whether that's Amazon or Azure or any on-prem environment, it is the same user license throughout that product. So that was in terms of cost. So any questions, Greg, Chris?
Yes, I've got one here, and then we'll see if Chris has another one there. So from Asif, when using AVD, gathering telemetry data about user sessions is also costly because it leverages log analytics. So it says here, are you doing anything in that area as well?
That's a great question. Yeah, so it sounds like that someone is very familiar with AVD. So definitely right. So if you start to doing AVD natively in Azure and you want to get insights in the user experience, so telemetry data, that requires you to deploy additional resources upon the virtual machines that you're already deploying based on log analytics. So it's called AVD Insights, and that works with log analytics underneath. And log analytics gathers that data, but it's an additional cost factor as well. So what we're doing with Parallels RAS, we're collecting that same telemetry data, but then in our own reporting service. So without the need of deploying log analytics, we're also collecting telemetry information about user performance, like who logged on to which application, what was the average logon time, which applications were launched, what was the group policy processing time, for example, without having the additional overhead in cost of log analytics. So yeah, the answer is yes, we're doing that, and even without the additional cost of the log analytics database.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, Frank. Chris, anything else from your side before we continue with the next section?
No, I've just answered a couple of questions online. I think that's it. I think I just posted a link. So, Bailey's asked for about training resources. I know it says certification, but you haven't got to do the certification in order to take the training. What I will say is we are imminently about to re-release the training for version 19. Both Frank and I have had a look at that. But we're not the ones responsible for that timeline. So I can't tell you exactly when it's been due for release, but the training is finished. We just need to release it. But feel free to go there. You can also look on YouTube. All of the training videos we've got are freely available on YouTube. Okay.
Great. So Chris, over to you for the summary.
Okay, brilliant. Well, hopefully that's been interesting. I know we don't have a lot of time left, but let's just bring it around to where we were before we began. Our entire company approach, when we're looking at Parallels RAS, because we're speaking to our customers the entire time, is to allow you to operate your applications where you want them to. And to be honest, speaking from a guy with a cut me in half and I'll bleed EUC, rule one of VDI is to put your applications next to your data, right? That's going to give you the best user experience possible. You've now potentially got data in different places, so you might need to be pushing applications from different places. Don't necessarily try and centralize all your applications knowing that your data is all over the place. You are gonna hit usability problems. So what we allow you to do is have a single console for the consumer, a single console for the administrator, and those applications can come from multiple sources. So I could have a full AVD desktop if I wanted to, but equally I could publish individual applications from different locations. I might have some in AWS, some on-prem. I might still need, for some reason, to access a physical PC somewhere. So it's really giving you the choice to do that. And then just a little bit about our future program, our future focus, just to give you an insight into our roadmap. In the future, what's coming down the line is going to be a fully managed cloud control plane. So right now, we allow you to install and administrate your own control plane wherever you want. You could put it on-prem, you could put it in Azure, you can put it in AWS, doesn't really matter. To make things even more simple, we are working on releasing a completely service-orientated cloud control plane, which by its nature will enable us to deliver that from any public cloud. Okay, so watch this space. Our focus is on the secure workspace. So there's lots of additional security features coming down the roadmap. For existing customers, please contact us and we can kind of talk you through what those are. But please be assured security remains at the top table from an application development point of view. And it's always going to be hybrid multi-cloud. Okay. We've got customers all the way from 100% in the public cloud all the way through to customers that went to the public cloud and now they're all coming back out again, right? So that's not the fault of public cloud. It's the fact that you as a business need to consider what the best use of these additional resources are for you. And we are there to help you do that. Don't lurch just because the emperor says he's got new clothes. Don't just take our word for it. We're all over TrustRadius. We've won some really cool awards. There's loads of references on there. Feel free to do your digging. I am often told off for saying this, but I'm going to say it at this point anyway. Do not trust anything a software vendor tells you when they're trying to say, buy our software, right? Don't trust any software vendor. You've got to go and do your own research. Please go and do your own research and make your own mind up. That's why we're here. We really do wear this power of choice badge on our sleeve. And you can learn more. There's some URLs in here. You'll get access to recording. You can go through all of that kind of stuff. As I've said, search engines are your friend. Please feel free to do that search. The training, as I've already said, is available on YouTube or on the URL I've put in the chat. And are there any further questions we can answer, Craig?
So no, it looks like that is all the questions that have come in, but it was a very good engagement, some excellent questions earlier on. It's great, we stuck right to time. In fact, we're going to give everybody about 1 minute back. So thank you, Chris and Freek, for the informative session. It's been an absolute pleasure to have everybody on. A huge thank you to all our guests as well. And don't hesitate to reach out with any questions. So you see the email address on your screen there. If you want to get in touch, please do so. If you want to try out the product, it's available on our website, and we're happy to work with you on that. So that wraps things up for the webinar today, and we look forward to seeing everyone again at the next one.